This presentation is on the prokaryotic cell, structure, and function. Okay, this is not something you necessarily need to write down in your notebooks, but I think it's an interesting diagram to show kind of the relationship between different organisms and different molecules that are found on planet Earth. So we start down here at the bottom with atoms as being the smallest on the list. We talked about amino acids already and what they are. So you put a bunch of atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen together, you get an amino acid. Put a bunch of amino acids together and you can make a polypeptide, which could be folded into a protein. And then we've got viruses as the next biggest on the list, which are made of protein and DNA together. From there we go up to the parts of cells. So chloroplasts, for example. Chloroplasts, for example, are something that's found inside cells. Most bacterial cells are next. They're bigger than cell parts, but still smaller than plant and animal cells. Plant and animal cells show up right here. Human egg versus the frog egg. Entire organisms, ant, mouse, human, and then of course the blue whale. And down here notice what types of microscopes we can use to see these different structures. What we use in class is a light microscope. So we could see chloroplasts with a light microscope, but anything smaller, such as viruses, proteins, amino acids, atoms, have to use an electron microscope to actually see. Alright, we do have two basic types of cells. Again, you're not going to have to write these down in your notebook at this point, but just kind of as an introduction of where we're headed here. As I said, this presentation right now today is going to talk about the prokaryotic cell. I'm just going to put prokaryotic cell there. We're going to focus on that, but we do have another presentation you'll be watching next that is about the eukaryotic cell. Alright, so both of these are cells, but they are very different in structure, size, and shape, and so we're going to have to focus on each one individually. So first with our prokaryotic cells. As you can see, prokaryotic cells don't have a lot of structures in them. If you look at this diagram right here, get rid of my drawing. Okay, so if you look at this diagram right here, we have a few structures that stand out. There's the DNA that's kind of here in the middle of the cell. There's some ribosomes scattered throughout. There's cytoplasm, a long flagellum, a plasma membrane, but that's about it. Okay, that's about all there is to it. They're very, very simple cells, these prokaryotic cells. Also, the way they divide is very simple. So they have one circular chromosome, which again is shown over here. And that circular chromosome will split in two, which they show here. And then the cell membrane divides, which is shown here. And now we've got two new cells. That whole process is called binary fission. So if you're going to put anything in your notes from this part of the presentation, just put a little description of binary fission and what that is, because that is something that's particular to the prokaryotic cells. Okay, we're going to go through some of the structures found in these prokaryotic cells next. The two structures that are covered on this page are cytoplasm and granules. Now there's going to be a lot of wordy things in these presentation slides, so you don't have to write everything down word for word. Just try to get kind of the main highlights of what these structures do and what's special about them. So we'll start with the cytoplasm. Okay, the cytoplasm is also known as protoplasm. Not necessarily something you have to write down, but just keep that in the back of your mind if you see that word come up. It's basically a matrix, which means like a surrounding substance that has all of these different things in it. So it's got water, enzymes, nutrients, waste, gases, so all sorts of tons of stuff for the cell, but also contains those cell structures. So because it has the cell structures, that's how the cell grows, how it makes energy, how it replicates. So all of those functions the cell does is going to be located in the cytoplasm. So the most important thing to know is that it's this matrix that contains all these different molecules as well as the cell structures themselves. The second structure on this slide, the granules, is particular to prokaryotic cells like bacteria. Bacteria is our example of a prokaryotic cell. And basically, that's how the bacteria are going to store their nutrients. So that's kind of the important part of what granules do. So the bacteria don't have a lot of other structures in them, as we saw. So they need a way to keep nutrients handy and available. They use granules for that. Later we'll talk about how putting some stain on these granules when we're looking at bacteria under a microscope can help us to identify those bacteria. We'll get to that later. All right, so the next one that we want to talk about with prokaryotic cells is the ribosome. The ribosome can be found in the cytoplasm or attached to the plasma membrane, and those are important. You want to make sure that you write that down. Their location can be in one or two places. And the question is, what do they do? So for ribosomes in prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, they make protein. As we know, protein is the structural component of things that are in cells, so proteins help to build stuff. And so we need those proteins to help build the cell. Your bacterial cells can contain thousands and thousands of ribosomes. The second one on this page is the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is like a skeleton for the cell, so it helps to scaffold or hold the shape of the cell itself. Oop, went too far. They just recently found out that bacterial cells even have a cytoskeleton, so that's a relatively new discovery. And the picture that you see down below with all the bright colors kind of shows that skeleton that's holding the cell in place, the kind of fluorescent green colors holding the shape of the cell.